Hi students, we're here with day 4 today. So the first thing you want to do is open your chapter 1 PowerPoint notes, and it's going to open a file that looks something like this. And you're going to want to fill those out kind of as we go along, okay? So to start things off here, we're going to get right started. We're going to respect your time. You start out here with your first daily blog. So read through this. If you're familiar with the area right down the street, I'm pointing, you guys don't know where I'm at, but right down the street on Mishawaka Road, State Road 19, also called Napanee Street, there's 2 Speedway gas stations on the same intersection, okay? And so we're going to talk about why we're going to analyze this, but as we kind of mentioned back on Friday, we're going to analyze decision making, right? And why, in this case, is Speedway doing this? What are they trying to accomplish by doing such? So you want to come with at least 3 reasons on your own. If you're with somebody, obviously you can work with a partner, but write those reasons down. Okay, take a second, pause the video, and get that done. Okay, so the answers that we most commonly get are revolve around, well, Speedway is trying to get as many consumers as possible. And if you are someone that has gotten gas before, I'm sure that you are someone that has gotten gas from the correct side of the street, right? So I want to turn right out of the gas station, and that, in this case for Speedway, they're going to maximize the number of people that are going to go to their business, right? So they've taken away that fact of people going the wrong direction to lose business if they're going in the wrong direction. Another thing that we've kind of said is obviously it takes away competition. So if I take away competition, another way that we behave is that we like to buy gas from 1 cent cheaper one side of the street or very near each other, right? So they've eliminated some of that competition. There's a fancy word for that. We call it monopoly power, and they might be able to raise the price of their gasoline by, 3 or 4 cents at that particular intersection. Some other things people have talked about are that sometimes if there's a really long line at one speedway, people will go back to the other one. We kind of talk about one of the things in the business world that would be the worst thing that would happen is somebody coming to your business and say, hey, I really want to buy your product, but I'm not really willing to wait for it, right? We do that with fast food a lot. And again, if you've ever gone to a fast food restaurant and said, hey, that line is way too long, and you've gone somewhere else, that's how you're behaving. And so, businesses are constantly getting creative into how to maximize the amount of people that come into their business. In fact, even McDonald's has kind of revolutionized what they've done. If you've noticed that it's been in the last 5 years or so, but now they have that second drive-through ordering station. I don't know if it's any faster, but what it does do is it hides a lot of cars that are in line back behind the building so you can't see it from the road, right? So you pull in, you're like, oh, the line is way longer than I thought. Maybe you wait, maybe you don't. But simple kind of things like that are kind of interesting. Same thing with kind of Taco Bell. If you go into Taco Bell down the street from the high school, you know that once you get into Taco Bell's ordering lane, you're not getting out, right? You can't put it in reverse. You can't pull around people, even so much so that they've put bushes on the right-hand side of their drive-through lane where you can't even pull out if they are going super slow and you don't feel like waiting. So, these businesses get creative. They don't do very many things on accident because it costs money to do all these things. And so they're very, very well thought out. And hopefully you're kind of understanding how can I get into the brains of some of these, business owners. Okay. So with that being said, we're going to move forward. You're going to be filling out those notes that I just showed you that look like this. They go in pretty clear order. I know that watching the video and filling them out at the same time is probably not super easy. In a perfect world, I guess you'd have 2 computers or you're able to print these out. It just kind of is what it is if you are, doing things from home. So good luck. I know it can be kind of a pain, but we're going to kind of move forward here. Okay.
Please Pardon the interruption.
All right, so let's get started. We got a very, very basic look at what we're going to be talking about. So we're obviously talking about economics. We defined that back on Friday for those of you that were following along day by day, and we're trying to study how people make choices. Okay, and the thing about making choices is we like to do a whole lot of stuff, right? We love to be entertained. We love to buy as much stuff as possible. And so it can be said that we have unlimited wants. Like we could always figure out a way that we can make our life or our day better. Not to say we can't be satisfied with our life. That's not what I'm trying to say, right? We can be content, but we can always say, hey, you know what? That would be really fun if I was able to do something else. So we have this idea of unlimited wants, and societies have that too. You know, you look at some of the arguments of politicians. Politicians are always trying to do more stuff for people. The trade-off of that is obviously that it's going to cost money. Different topic for a different day. We'll get to later on. Those of you that get into the business world, you'll see that there's two general sections of economics. We have microeconomics that looks at individuals, so businesses on their own, individuals on their own, and then we can also look at macroeconomics, and that's going to be what government policies that get implemented, and that's how they're going to affect businesses and people's demand and that type of stuff. We touch on both, but there are two different types of economics that are very broad, and then you can study things with inside those two, but that's not for us to discuss today. All right. Um, there's a concept that's important to understand. It's referred to as scarcity. Okay, and it kind of goes back to our unlimited wants and this idea of scarcity. Is the idea that things run out, right? So we mentioned before that our time, our income is extremely scarce. On a more broad scale, right? Whether it's a country scale or a global scale, okay. We have things like oil, that's a very scarce resource. We have land that's very scarce, right? And depending on where you live, different types of resources are more scarce. Okay, and so we're trying to predict what the best way for people to use, governments to use, societies to use these scarce resources are. How should we use tax dollars to satisfy and be as efficient as possible for people to be as healthy or as supported as they should, right? And so, as we go through talking about this stuff, that is the idea. This is why we have to make these decisions. Okay. The most scarce resource in the world is probably your time, and the reason I say that is because we can't put a dollar amount on it. And if I were to ask you what the most scarce resource was, a lot of people like to say, gold or diamonds or oil, air, maybe fresh air. But your time's the most scarce because you can't make it back. You can't get it back. You can't buy more. Okay, we can't put a dollar amount on it. And there's a reason why you get annoyed when you have to do something that you don't want to do, right? And we've all used the phrase, well, that's 15 minutes of my life I'll never get back. We've all used that phrase before where we get frustrated, where we have to, what we would consider waste our time. All right. And again, I just kind of explained that slide right there. Now, what we also got to understand, and when we start thinking about what economists do, okay, we need to be able to measure costs in ways besides dollars. Okay, so just some examples of trade-offs that you give up in order to come to school on a day-to-day basis. Well, if you're here, you probably have to get up earlier than you normally would, so we can measure that in sleep hours, right? Maybe you give up eating breakfast because you're in a hurry. Maybe you give up, being able to play with your dog or play video games. We can list all sorts of things that you give up in order to do something. Okay, so just the fancy term economists use is referred to as trade-offs. All right, when we give something up and we decide to do something else. Eventually, we're going to talk about this idea of an opportunity cost, where we identify just one trade-off, okay, that we're going to use as the measuring stick of what we give up to choose to do something. Okay, so that term opportunity cost is going to come up in the next couple days. Sometimes economists use graphs and models. We'll look at our first graph here in the next couple days. We'll look at another graph referred to as a supply and demand graph. You've probably heard the concept of supply and demand. We'll get very familiar with those. And we can use those to try to prove our thoughts. Okay, and we'll get to that when we get there. We referred to economists before as social scientists, okay? And just like any other scientists, economists are going to make hypotheses, right? They're going to try to predict what people are going to do if certain policies are implemented. So maybe that policy is very complicated and say, okay, what is our economy going to do if we create a tariff on imported goods from China, right? We could try to make a prediction of what's going to happen with that. If we get to the point where we're able to implement that policy, where we test this hypothesis, test this prediction, we're going to see what happens, and then we can use that idea in the long run and try to create a new hypothesis. Okay, so you guys use these hypotheses all the time, not on a as dramatic basis of what a president or Congress might decide to do, but you decide, okay, what will happen if I miss first period today, right? Is it going to be a big deal? And you create these hypotheses each and every decision that you make. You just do it really, really, really fast, and it happens so often that you don't even realize how often you're playing this role of an economist where you're analyzing why people are making decisions. Okay, that's all the notes I have for you today. Okay, you've got a couple things that you need to make sure you do. First of all, we've got a second daily blog here. I'm going to go into some depth on Tuesday about this daily blog, so it's going to be important that you spend some time on it. First of all, it is applicable to your life, right? What are you deciding to do here in the next 8 or 9 months or so? And I know you juniors are a little bit behind that, but what are you deciding to do? And can we list some positives and negatives of going to college? So these economic costs of doing these things, and you can go in depth. Okay, obviously, if you're doing it at home, no one's going to see it anyway. But I will kind of explain some different ways to think about things for you virtual people, and then when you come to class on Monday and Tuesday, you hybrid people as well. If you want to type these in, it'll show you how much it costs to go to colleges in Indiana, and you can kind of look at some of that stuff. I'll briefly touch on that when we get to that on that particular day. So make sure you get an answer for that. Okay. The other thing that you're going to be responsible for is, okay, you've got a brief reading assignment that you need to get into. Okay, so your reading assignment is going to look like this. It's extremely short. It's the easiest 10 points you're going to get from reading something probably in the history of high school. Okay, and we don't do many reading assignments, but again, it's a little bit to keep us a little bit busy. Okay, and give you something to get some points and some value out of having watched the video. Okay, for those of you, obviously you need to read. So there's a link right here. Here's the reading text. It didn't open. All right, I'll have to relink that. Okay, the reading text will pop up and it will look like this. Okay, so once you get this, you can read through it. If you really want a book, get a hold of me. We'll get it to you. We read a little bit of the first chapter and a little bit of the second chapter. All you need to do is have this PDF file and you have all the stuff that you need. Okay, and I'll make a new one for chapter 2 stuff and we'll get to that stuff. Okay, if you really want a book, come see me. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of stick with this because we don't use it very often at all. Okay, I'd rather you try to communicate with me first, and there's some YouTube videos I can link you to if you get stuck on some other stuff that will be a little bit more applicable. Okay, so all this stuff that you need to do is listed. We'll talk again tomorrow for day 5, and I hope you're getting your feet underneath of you and getting used to this process. Okay, keep it up. I have all your responses from those of you that have done it. I like reading your responses on those, especially those introduction things, and your responses on the plane crash stuff were interesting too. It's always interesting to see how people think about things. Make sure if you haven't done those, you get those to me. I can give you points. Obviously, if you don't, then then you don't get points. Okay. Questions? Don't hesitate to contact me and stay safe out there and make sure you're taking care of yourself.